Welcome to the Data Strategy Show. My name's Samir Sharma and I'll be your host for the next 60 minutes. My guest today is Vukosi Sambo. Vukosi is an experienced executive with over 10 years of experience in insurance, banking, FMCG and market research. He is an expert specialist in data science, digital strategies, infonomics, data monetization, risk management and actuarial, business architecture, consumer research and insights, remuneration design, process analysis, change and operations management. He currently serves as the Chief Data Officer at Kaelo, a South African health insurer with over 1 million lives under cover, specialising in primary healthcare, wellness programs, gap cover and on-site clinics. He also serves as the chairperson of the Remuneration Committee, member of the People Committee, member of the IT and Data Committee, and company's Group Executive Committee. Prior to joining Kaelo, Vukosi held senior roles in Discovery Bank, SAB, Nelson, and Discovery Health. He's won several awards, including Global Top 100 Data Visionaries 2020, Discovery CEO Outstanding Leader Star Award, and Top Region Matriculant Limpopo. I hope you enjoy the episode, and please do leave your comments. Vukosi Sambo, welcome to the Data Strategy Show. It's such a delight to have you here. Vukosi, you are the Chief Data Officer for Kaelo, and it really is a privilege to have you on, and you're based in Johannesburg, aren't you? So listen, Vukosi, pleasure to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to data?
Thanks, Amir. Thanks for having me. It's such a
Pleasure.
privilege. I'm honored to be your guest today. So yes, based in Joburg, and I know you are all the way from London. My journey has been quite an interesting and exciting one. I think from a South African context, I must say that the data science and the chief data officer role, it's a fairly new one. It probably hasn't matured as in the Europe or North America or some of the more developed economies. So we probably didn't have this role 10 years ago, quite frankly. And I started my career over 10 years, so this didn't exist. So did data science. And
Right.
I feel like I stumbled into all of this as I went along. What consistent is that somehow I have always been working with data in different areas. So I started more on the reporting or BI side of
Right.
data or data analytics. And I also learned quite a bit in terms of like data warehouse databases earlier on in my career. And I started moving more into market research. I worked for at some point in my time, in my career. As the data fraternity evolved, especially in South Africa, and kind of formalized to what we see now, which is more data science, but by that fundamental history of just the strong data management, data governance principles. That's how I ended up more as a chief data officer for Kaelo. I've been data officer for about 2 years now.
Okay.
It's been quite an exciting journey, also playing my role in terms of defining or shaping what really a chief data officer is, and interacting with other colleagues in the industry, especially in the context, as to how they see that role for their organization. We've seen organizations that split that role between CDO and also the chief analytics officer, but in my case, I look at the entire end-to-end process. So it's been quite an exciting journey, and I wouldn't imagine myself really doing anything different than data. Whether you call it data science or chief data officer or analytics, data really is more my DNA. So it's been an exciting journey, and I've grown a lot over the last 10 plus years.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Great introduction. I love the fact that you've gone through that, the organic view of data and how it's emerged over time. But it's really good to hear about you being in that role as Chief Data Officer. And I think what I'd like to understand is, as a new type of role within your industry, within your business, what have been some of the areas or challenges that you've seen in terms of your role, data, and the wider business, and how did you overcome those as a pretty new function? Because I think, you mentioned that there are, maybe the Western world, i.e. Europe and America, are a little bit more mature, but sometimes I don't see that. So, I'm always speaking to different chief data officers and understanding where they are on that journey and their challenges, and how they overcame that. So that'd be really good to understand.
I think the biggest challenge is that organizations, same as Kaelo and even my previous employers, have in a way always really used data to make decisions. But what I've seen fundamentally change over the last few years is that data has moved from being this back office supporting processes and just more reporting to the front line to say now it is at the center of how we understand consumption behavior, how we understand our products. And I think there's been this significant transition from that old way of data to data being talked about as an asset. I do think that a lot of people who don't understand, or there are different views of what it actually really means. But for me, I've always translated it is I've always kind of went back to what has for the longest time been referred to as asset, especially say the physical asset that we even report on in the financials according to the global accounting standards, and try to draw similarities to say, does data satisfy most of those principles? And if it does, how can we start measuring and treating it as asset, just like we would a normal physical asset? And that has been one of the most exciting parts of this journey for me. Whether eventually we as data practitioners advocate for this to be eventually included in the balance sheet.
Yes, I would hope.
For a separate day, I'm obviously for that, because that's how much I believe data is an asset. I mean, I just can't imagine some of the trillion-dollar organizations viewed, or their assets being viewed outside data. So actually, probably their most valuable asset is data.
Is data.
It probably settles part of that argument, but whether we'll see it in the accounting reports, it's a separate story. So with with that view, with every asset, obviously one of the main assumptions is that there's this value or return that you try to realize over time from that asset. So that has kind of really informed this logical conclusion that said, if I'm going to look at data as an asset, I need to emphasize the need to create the value or to monetize this asset so that I can demonstrate how much of an asset or how valuable an asset is. So it's really underpinned this direction that we have taken, or that I've steered as an organization into, and create a monetization strategy. What has really worked well for me with that strategy is that the minute you start talking that monetization language and you demonstrate the value, you actually find that it's easier to speak to your colleagues around the table, I mean, at a senior level, because that's the language they understand. And for the time, we data practitioners had not elevated to the level where we speak the business language.
Interesting point. In terms
of how we're creating products, in terms of how data is helping with efficiency. So it's the things we're doing, but we just didn't take it one dimension, you know.
So interesting for me then, because you talk about asset, you talk about monetization. To get the investment in that asset, how do you start to prove the value? And also, so there's two questions there. There's one about proving the value of data, telling our colleagues in different parts of the business, look, you are sitting on a gold mine. You are sitting on data that could help you improve the processes internally, create better products. But equally, we're thinking about how do we, and on the other side is monetization. So, how do you do that? Have those conversations first, and then in your context, it would be really good to understand the definition of monetization, because lots of people have their own views. Most people, when you raise data monetization, they run for the hills because they think you're going to sell their data and the world is going to end and we're going to be in a dystopian future. So it would just be great to understand from those two contexts, an asset value and then the definition of monetization.
Thanks. So yes, starting more with the definition of data monetization in terms of how we see it on our side is that I've got an extended definition, if I can call it that. It's
Sure.
more comprehensive to the traditional view, like you say, that scares people off to say we are now going to start selling our data off.
Yes.
What about regulation that is linked to that and all of that? To say, I think for me, I've just simplified it to say the minute you are creating value or wealth that is measured rand or dollar or pound terms from the use of data, then you are actually monetizing. That's why I've told most people every time I talk about this that you're probably already doing this.
Yes.
You just to probably make it more your strategy and make it more your focus, because it just, for me, is a very effective way of looking at data. It's value driven for me. Value. So with that said, we do still acknowledge the external and the internal trading components that is linked to how you then proceed. So the internal part will generally be how you use data to gain insights that help you create efficiencies in your processes, things you can automate, and also then taking it to how you can wrap data solutions around how you create products, and even in terms of even the traditional products, how you can embed some of the reporting to your clients to add more value to how they the product itself. So the product design itself, but secondly in how some of the traditional products with just embedding some of the smart reporting that your clients can interact and understand your products in a more dynamic way, already has a lot of value, and drives a lot of retention, cross-sell, upsell of your existing products. And there is obviously a room for the external data trading, given the regulatory landscape that you operate in, and also just your views in terms of how you see that data exchange model and the kind of data you're looking at. Obviously, I mean, we deal with data, so there's obviously a lot of confidentiality.
Sure.
And so we do also need to be quite careful before
of course.
we do any form of external data monetization at all. So actually most of our monetization, is, as much as I've made it a central strategy, is actually internal than external in a way. So so we've seen that, and where we have the approach that I've really taken is that you look for quick wins, low hanging fruit. What you do is, for me, build momentum, pick one of the easiest low hanging fruit within the business and quickly demonstrate that value, and have business realize that value quickly with minimal spend in terms of the question that you ask in terms of investing into those assets.
Sure.
But that you demonstrate that to your stakeholders, and you give them some sort of a roadmap to say, this is how much more we could do using similar concepts, and these are the areas of opportunity. And still take that approach of to say, the ease and impact metrics. That's what I kind of like really use. How easy it is to do this, and what is the impact, and really those low hanging fruits, but also understand the longer term, more sustainable initiatives that you may want to embark on that will prove quite useful in the long run, and gradually invest in those and ensure that some of the short-term ones are paying for that investment anyway.
Of course.
It just makes it more well received by the senior management and anyone who's who you are trying to get to sponsor these initiatives.
So when you came in to Kaelo, and you started to look around and you started to think, okay, well, we've got to start using our data better. One of the things that you and I have discussed is around aligning it to the business strategy.
Yes.
How did you start to pull in your colleagues? How did you start to make an informed opinion about who was doing what, where you needed to target and focus those low-hanging fruit, and how, so other new chief data officers or chief analytics officers out there thinking, how do I do this? Where do I go? What did you set up, and what sort of teams did you put around yourself, in the first, I don't know, 100 days, or what would the, let's say, the priorities for you as a chief data officer engaging with a business who might be slightly thinking, who is this guy? There's another chief, there's another, in the C-suite, and it's something that we come up against quite a lot. So it's just, from your insights, it would be really interesting to hear how you provided them with that view on how you bring that value to the table.
Yes, rightly put there, because I mean, this was a role that did not exist. So I was not necessarily replacing anyone, you know, it was a new role.
Yes.
So firstly, you had to like really help people come to terms with what is this real role really all about, like I mentioned earlier. And then move from there to say this role being intentional, it's here to kind of lift data to the next level and help you to start treating data more preciously as an asset because of the value that you stand to gain from you treating it that way.
Sure.
And then in terms of most of the stakeholders that you generally find that are involved in this process, like you say, are then the other people in the organization. So the minute we had this discussion at Exco, there was a fairly good alignment, and that's why the role was created in the first place. But obviously, when it comes to walking the talk and really executing this strategy, it was then getting your hands dirty and trying to work with everyone in the whole organization. And the things there that I've learned along that journey, I mean, I would be lying if I said it has been a perfect journey in terms of...
Oh, I'm sure it hasn't.
But one of the big factors has been the literacy issue. I think I'm not sure about your guys' side, but I mean, we come from a background where people just are a bit afraid of data. When they think data, they think it's for clever guys, and they get overwhelmed, you know, and trying to get people slightly data literate, but in a way that is appropriate for them has been one of the key programs that we've had to concurrently with this strategy. Do we get people to be users of data in a way that is appropriate for them? And that's where I quickly learned that there was a bit of a 70-20-10 split. Actually, 70% of the people, I mean, I think Jack Welch talks about this a lot. So 70% of your people really are basic users. They don't really need to overly interrogate the data even. They just need to understand the basic metrics that actually relate to performance outputs in their own environment, especially in ops. And really only 20% starts really interrogating and investigating the data and wanting to understand deeper insights and details. And 10% will be your super users, which will be your data science team building these advanced analytics, machine learning models, and so forth. So the minute you realize that you've got a good opportunity to reach a wider network without having to really do the complicated stuff. And I went to those ops people and I basically position myself as an enabler to say, I'm here to help you understand your world better and help you take your level of performance from one level to another. So that enabling approach of making them understand that I'm here to help you do your job better and do it better and do more of what you've been doing was a really, really good start, because I think sometimes people, when they think reporting, they think you are there to expose their shortfalls. They are not doing so that they get in trouble with the senior management. Minute we changed that mindset, and so we're invested in getting more literate around to use data, dashboards, and so forth. We found them more welcoming and more receptive to the plan. And the minute they engaging with it, you just saw this overall lift and improvement in just the decision making capability. So this is what I call the tacit returns, even in the monetization, to say just even the way people now interact with the clients, how they make decisions, you can tell that it's a lot more different, it's a lot more empowered than it was without this data. But you had to first get them comfortable and warm and receptive to using the data.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I think data literacy itself is probably and still continues to be an extremely immature aspect all over the world. I don't think there's one continent that does it better than another. I think they all still have their flaws in terms of mostly. The funniest thing was when reading some of the data literacy project outcomes and outputs and results, you tend to find that there's a 90 to 95% data literacy issue within finance departments. So that is also really quite an amazing factor around, you know, you thinking that they should be perfect, they should be understanding data, but it's specific because, you know, it's right. It's about how do we take a piece of data, how do we extrapolate insight from it, and how do we make, how do we take actions and decisions from that bit. Now, not everybody is absolutely aware that I need to do X, Y, and Z once I've done this. So, so yes, it's basically that. So the one thing that, you know, we talked about data monetization. Just tell me about how you embedded a system or process or foundation of data monetization.
I think how I embedded it is to say value is the gospel. So it doesn't matter how fancy your model, your analytics is. It needs to be simplified to the level of what will it deliver in terms of return on investment, to whether you're trying to improve a process or you're trying to design better product. What are your projections as to what the uptake of that product is, if you so believe that there's something rich in your data that has given you insight on how to make a product or benefit enhancement that you want to take to market. So I have literally always just challenged every data output that we've done to always have that last piece of saying what is the projected value that will come from these insights, from this dashboard, from this piece of analysis. And I mean, we haven't necessarily gotten it accurate. I mean, in some instances, we have like literally gotten that prediction of how much value was sitting in that insight completely wrong. But I think it has started changing the way people think, firstly, and that was for me the most important thing.
Sure.
And in cases we have even just understated even the value. So it's actually, we've been pleasantly surprised in a way. So I think creating a framework as to anything that we do from a data analytics point of view needs to tick these main things to say what is the value that you are trying to derive, how does it help the business achieve its objective. Secondly, what is the analytics that you need or insights that you are trying to establish to be able to answer or to meet those needs for the business or for the client. And then tell me what data, what are the different sources that you could be getting the data to be able to achieve that. Do you need to augment other external data sources, or is the data from your operational system fairly rich and sufficient enough for you to make enough or reliable insights that will guide the business in their decision making or not? And that obviously then start guiding you whether you are happy with what you have or you want to enrich it a lot more. And also understanding the analytics output itself. If you're trying to, it's one thing to establish a relationship versus trying to just do a prediction in terms of data that you will need, the quality and everything else. So trying to build this framework to say, this is the business question, these are the things we're trying to achieve as the business. What are the data answers that will answer those questions? what kind of models or analytics do you want to build? What do those require? Do they require this level of data or complexity or quality and so forth? Building it into a framework to say no one ever does anything in an isolated way that comes as if it was a data issue or an analytics exercise or a monetization exercise or a business exercise. It needs to always be part of a one chain all the time. The more you reinforce that integration, the easier it just becomes over time. And it helps people just have this good, comprehensive, widespread view of the business itself.
Okay, Vukosi, we're coming to the end of our conversation, but I just want to ask one last question. Yes. For those up-and-coming chief data officers in Africa, for example, or even around the world, what are the top 3 things, what advice would you give them in order to get to that point? And what are the top 3 things they need to think about and do to get to becoming a chief data officer?
I think, firstly, for me, don't reinvent the wheel. Okay. I think there's a lot of value in what has already been done, not necessarily be seen as something that will sit in the chief data officer, but actually a lot has already been done. So try to leverage what is existing. And I think the second thing that I would really advise is to say, you have to do this. I think for me, it feels like where we were maybe a couple of decades ago about IT, whether organizations are IT organizations or not. Whether companies are IT organizations or not, now it's a separate story, but everyone has IT in their business in one form or shape. So I think data and data science and AI, machine learning are going to be in every business. So you have to you have to participate in this. You have to participate and you have to start somewhere. But as you do that, make sure that you are designing a solution that is fit for purpose. I think there's no silver bullet here. There's no one fits all. Make sure you clearly understand what your organization is trying to achieve. And that is why I think you and I share the same passion of trying to link everything to the business strategy, because you can go and adopt and spend even a lot of money on either tools, tech, and even the effort itself from a data point of view to something that is misaligned to your business objectives and goals. So for purpose is a very, very important concept, and it helps you just maximize the value. And essentially that's what it boils down to. And you have heard throughout this conversation how I punted on the value issue. It's value.
Yeah. On that note, Vukosi, I've had a wonderful chat with you. It's been a pleasure to have you on. I could talk much longer, and I know that we will, but I thank you so much for your time and wish you a good day. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Amir. Have a good one. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.